Welcome to the Gaslight Effect Podcast. I'm Robin Stern, co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of the best-selling book, The Gaslight Effect. I'm an educator and a psychoanalyst, but first and foremost, I'm a wife, a mother, a sister, aunt, and healer. And just like many of you, I was a victim of gaslighting. Please join me for each episode as I interview fascinating guests and explore the concept of gaslighting. You'll learn what it truly means to be gaslighted, how it feels, how to recognize it, and how to understand it, and ultimately, how to get out of it. Before we begin, I want you to know that talking about gaslighting can bring up challenging and painful emotions. Give yourself permission to feel them. Some of you may want to go more deeply with your emotions, while some of you may hold them more lightly. No matter what you're feeling, know that your emotions are a guide to your inner life. Your emotions are sacred and uniquely you. Respect and embrace them, for they have information to give you. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for being here with me. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Gaslight Effect Podcast. I'm delighted to have Isabelle Morley, Dr. Isabelle Morley, with me today, and she is the author of the brand new book, They're Not Gaslighting You. Isabelle, Dr. Morley is a clinical psychologist who practices in Boston, and please tell us more about yourself and your work. And Isabelle, if I may, please tell us how you came to the title and to the subject matter of your book.
It's a great question. I'll just say I'm so excited to be here speaking with you. As I said, the foremost expert on gaslighting. I know my book sounds a little misleading, as if I don't believe in gaslighting, when in fact I very much do and see it. And that's why, as I'll explain, I came to this book. But yes, I'm a psychologist. I primarily treat couples in my practice. I'm an EFT-certified couples therapist. And I love working with couples as they navigate the hardships of their relationships. And over the past, I would say 5, maybe 8 years, I have noticed couples coming in with so much more therapy language because they have been in their own individual therapy. They have been on social media and learned a lot of words. And I have noticed it becoming increasingly problematic in the work that we do together. And instead of helping people understand each other and move forward in their relationship, it's holding them back. Gaslighting being one of those words that people have learned, misunderstood. The definition of it has expanded in ways in which it doesn't really align with its true meaning. And I decided that it was time to just address it quite directly with a book with a slightly provocative title, in part to capture people's attentions, because this is a world in which it is hard to
Attention. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so I celebrate the fact that you wrote this book. I think it's really fantastic. Of course, many of us who have been writing about gaslighting have been interviewed about, well, is gaslighting being overused? Is it being misused? But to actually have a book dedicated to this, I think is quite a gift to the public. So thank you so much for your work. When you said a few minutes ago that the use or the overuse of therapy speak is problematic for people, can you unpack that a little bit for our listeners? Why does it get us in trouble, and why is it happening? Aside from it is just more popular to talk about therapy speak or to use therapy speak, why is it happening more and more, and why does it get us into trouble?
It's happening more because people have greater exposure to these words, and the increased awareness of psychological disorders, of terms of abuse, I think is such a great thing that people know more about them. However, it is very easy to misapply these words. And I think that I would separate out, I see a lot of misuse, people using the words incorrectly, but with good intent. And then I see weaponization, where people are taking terms and then using it to gain power and control over other people by hanging on to the deference we give to clinical terms. And I think that there is such an appeal to have an answer. Like, of course, you want to know if the person you're with is bipolar, is gaslighting you, and you can point to that problem and solve it. And it absolves us of blame and responsibility, which humans are fine with as well, not being part of the problem. And it keeps us from being vulnerable, which is so scary. You can say, you crossed my boundary.
Tell us more about that. How does it keep us from being vulnerable? I think that's very interesting. And I know people will be thinking, well, okay, I get the weaponization and I get the frequency of these words out there, but tell me more.
It's a way of pointing to the other person's deficiencies, missteps, mistakes, right? This is an accusation. This is your problem. You did this wrong, without having to say what the impact was on you. Because you came home in a really different bad mood, I felt sad. I felt uncertain about the security of our relationship. I felt embarrassed when you made that joke about me in public. Instead of that, it's you're bipolar. You crossed my boundary, right? You're a narcissist, which stops people from actually sharing how they feel.
I love that you said that because with the emphasis on stops, because it ends the conversation. Well, you're a narcissist, as if that is the end of the conversation, when it's actually maybe it's true, maybe it's not even, but it's the beginning of a conversation if someone's treating you in a certain way and you're responding in a certain way. So, if you will, and all of our listeners, uh, how you came to be a therapist and what attracted you to working with couples to begin with.
I am a middle child, is the long and short of it. I mean, a classic case of middle child. I have three siblings, and I put myself in the role of mediator. I wanted to understand why family rifts were happening. I wanted to understand myself and my part in them, or in healing them, or my self triangulation in them. And so I just pursued therapy, thinking that it was what I found the most fascinating. And I have always found romantic relationships to be so wonderful, so fulfilling, so hard to navigate. And I love couples work. I think it is just the most exciting, engaging. I think it was Julie Manano who said, couples work is for the thrill seekers in the therapy world, the skydivers who want an intense 60 minutes to fly by, which is not for everyone. But I just think there's such beauty in helping people figure out how to be together in a happy, healthy way.
So, did you go a traditional path to get a college degree and then PhD?
I did.
Yeah, couples in your internship, or did you happen upon it and say, "This is me"?
I've always cared about interpersonal relationships. So in college, I was actually not a psych major. I was a peace and justice studies major, and I focused on interpersonal conflict resolution. And then straight from college, I went right into grad school to get my PsyD and did my dissertation on hookup culture, which was a rising topic at the time. And then I did a bunch of internships, but there wasn't much couples focus because I think it's a new thing now that couples therapy is so popular that there are couples therapy tracks in this way that there are now. And there's so many orientations. So I just sought it out on my own and did trainings and certifications on my own and filled up my practice wherever I was with couples.
And did you find that there was, or looking back now, is hookup culture full of gaslighting?
Hookup culture is full of non-communication. I think the hard part of hookup culture and modern dating is that you're not supposed to feel or say anything. You're supposed to be unaffected. I think gaslighting happens more once you're in the relationship, from what I've seen, but you may actually know the answer to that better than me.
Well, interesting. I think that there often are people who attempt gaslighting who are involved in hookup culture. But as you point out, in I guess in your Psych Today article, I think that one-off in gaslighting is not really where the problem is. The problem is when it's what gaslighting when gaslighting really hurts. It's that ongoing in the power relationship, repeated over time, um, attempt to destroy your reality or to undermine.
Yeah. And I think that's the tricky thing about gaslighting, which again, you will know even better than I do, is that it's not typically so easily seen. And people are calling out gaslighting very quickly in the first instance of invalidation. But often it's people finding out years down the line, oh, this was slowly happening to me and I didn't realize it.
So, what do you think is the most important thing for people to approach your book with? Like, what's the lens?
Oh, curiosity and empathy for themselves and for others. And I self-disclose plenty in my book that I am so far from perfect that I have misused these terms and armchair diagnosed people because it helps everybody feel better. And sometimes you lean on that as a coping strategy. But if you want to improve your relationships and you want to be accurate with these words, you have to be curious and you have to be empathic towards the people that you love.
It's interesting. I think that people, what I have seen is that people are using this language, therapy speak, because other people are using it, and you just get on the bandwagon. And so, speaking of getting on the bandwagon, can you talk a bit about how social media is involved in this proliferating therapy speak, or does it not happen as much, or does it happen more on TikTok, on Instagram? Can you talk about that?
Social media is the breeding ground for misuse and weaponized therapy speak in a way that I think was intended to be nothing but helpful and to raise awareness, to empower people. However, the format of all this content is too short to get a deep understanding, to get context and nuance. So people, even experts, are doing their very best to break down information into these bite-sized pieces and to be accurate and convey it. But if a person chooses to just read one short post or to consume information from non-experts that's not accurate, it's very easy to develop a wrong impression. I think TikTok is probably the bigger offender, but Instagram is right up there.
Tell us why. What's the difference for you between what happens on TikTok and I mean, some people may actually not even know the difference between TikTok and Instagram, although not many, but
A good point. TikTok is all videos. So there's no pictures, there's no carousels where you can swipe through reading, what are 15 signs of actual gaslighting? There isn't a chance for that greater depth. And TikTok is meant to quickly capture your attention with something extreme or exciting or explosive. And there's little room for clinical nuance in that format. And I think there's just been more research on the ways in which TikTok mental health information is misleading compared to Instagram.
I certainly agree with you. As someone who learned about TikTok and Instagram, probably at a more advanced age than other people are using it, but proud that I learned. So
It's hard to learn. I still don't understand TikTok. I can't quite figure out what's exciting or addictive about it. Instagram makes more sense to me, but I think that's again maybe my age.
can you give us an example of what a an interaction would look like where people are weaponizing therapy speak, either gaslighting or something else?
Weaponizing is definitely the more serious offender in the misuse of therapy speak. I see abusive people very effectively weaponize therapy speak. The example being, if listeners probably know what DARVO is, which is when an abusive partner defends themselves and reverses the role of victim and offender. So acts like they're the one who has been wronged and hurt by the other person, the survivor. A very effective tactic on making the other person feel like they are to blame, they should apologize. I see weaponized therapy speak show up there all the time of, you are taking issue with my behavior, right? That's a boundary violation for me that you would even dare ask me to change the way I show my anger or show my love for you. How could you impede upon my boundaries? That's such a toxic thing for you to do. Only a narcissist would act like that, right? And it's so easy to be scared of these words and then to sort of back down and agree.
So the person who is on the receiving end, what's happening for that person?
First of all, they're terrified that it's true, that they have been unknowingly, unconsciously abusive, crossing boundaries, that they could have a personality disorder that they've never known, right? That somebody is expressing this to them. They are incredibly confused, which is a classic experience for somebody who's in an abusive relationship of any kind. Nothing makes sense. And they start to, like with gaslighting, not trust themselves and believe the other person.
I agree, and I think that was very well said, and I like the example. It's a little bit like growing up in a family where your parents are gaslighting you, to be in a relationship where you're being gaslighted. If you feel that same kind of, well, they love me, why would they say something that wasn't true? Or he's my biggest support. And I hear from a lot of patients and as children, reporting as children being gaslighted by parents, but also as you hear in couples where it's hard to hold both of those things. He loves me or she loves me. And wait a minute, could that possibly not be true? Why would they say that if it's not true? You were nodding your head as I was talking.
Oh, yes, because it's under the guise of being concerned and helpful, right? And you see that like I'm honestly worried about you. Your moods, you're so reactive. Like I do think that you have borderline. And it's under this disguise of, oh, they care, they're concerned, they're noticing something that's not working for me, they want to help me, when really it's their way of controlling you, containing you, blaming you, not taking any responsibility. But it's so hard to see through that smokescreen.
Especially women will typically point the finger of blame at themselves, rather say, wait a minute, something going on here that's not okay. On the receiving end, what do you recommend when somebody's having the experience of, wow, this, like, that's me? I didn't think that was me. That's so confusing, but it must be right. Like, I realize that about myself.
In the book, I go through for each term and disorder and give people a step-by-step guide because I think this is maybe the most important question of like, how do you respond when people do this to you? And the first thing I always think people need to do is take a beat, take a breath, and not immediately react because their immediate reaction could feed into the other person's conclusion and give them evidence. See, you're freaking out. I'm just trying to tell you about how I feel, and you're getting this upset. Like, that's something wrong with you. So, to take a breath, manage the situation that moment with that person, and circle back to the word.
Mean by manage the situation at that moment? Because if, let's say, go back to the example you're using, like you're freaking out now. Like, what? See this? Like you do have a problem. So how do you manage? What do you suggest for people?
Sometimes managing means leaving the situation, taking a break from that moment, from that person until you have gained enough common clarity to be able to respond in a way that is not going to feed into whatever cycle you're stuck in with them. And I encourage people to take that time and to think, okay, have 5 other people mentioned that maybe I could be a narcissist? Like, is there something to this? Have I ever worried? Do I have a therapist I can talk to about this? Is there any veracity to this? And for them to decide before they then engage with the person again. Because sometimes a person does have a legitimate concern, right? I do think you have OCD and you do not recognize how abnormal this is, how problematic this is, how it's affecting my life. Sometimes you should take that in and think about it. Sometimes what you need to do is come back and say, I see that this really upsets you. I want to understand more about what happened for you in that moment that you would get so angry as to say this about me. And then you have to tackle the word itself and say, I want us to know what the definition of this word is and only use it if we really mean it. Otherwise, it's a problem.
Well, and I love that. And I also, just taking it a step further, I really like to tell people to look out for times where what the person's saying to you is in fact true, but it's not relevant to what the conversation was, right? So maybe I do have OCD, but what does that have to do with the fact that you didn't show up on time?
Yes. Oh, what a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Because then that person is weaponizing a disorder that you have to get their way, to be blameless all the time, right? Yes. And again, in the book, I say if you think you're with someone, you have a parent who might have a disorder, a boss is exhibiting a certain trait. If you want to be effective in addressing that with a person, there's a way to do it. And it's not by accusing them of that word in an argument, right? Like if you really care and have concerns about it, there's a way to approach that. And you would want that same respect and empathy treated towards you if maybe you had one of these terms disorders.
And what do you hear, if we can go back to your practice for a minute, what do you hear when people come into your office? What's typically something that brings people in?
Communication issues is what everyone will cite on every intake form and every consult call. We are having a hard time communicating. We're having a hard time managing conflict.
And so you sit down with the person or the couple and you ask them to go at it and you can listen, or what happens?
Well, I'm EFT certified, so that's primarily how I practice. And that is all based on attachment theory. And so the first thing I do is sort of diagnose what the negative cycle is that they're stuck in, how the way their behaviors are interacting is sinking them into this dynamic that is making them both feel unseen and unheard and unappreciated and angry. But I don't let couples fight for a long time in front of me because, as I always say, they can do that at home on their own time. But teaching people how to go beneath the content, go beneath the accusations, the behaviors, and actually get to the emotional piece, which is always the most important, is the biggest part of my work. And therapy speak stops that.
So can you say more specifically how therapy speak stops that? Like it, because I would think that people think they're going beneath.
I mean, the first and perhaps biggest way it does that is that people have come in with conclusions about the other person that they are not willing to waver from. And I have people, leaving me calls before session saying, just want you to know, me and my therapist have decided that my spouse is a narcissist. And I want you to know that heading into this. And it has never been right. To this day, I have not seen it be right. I've seen plenty of narcissists in my practice, but they're hard to identify, harder than you would think. So people have come in deciding this person is a clinical level issue and I need them to get fixed. That is a big barrier from day one, because then you're dealing with psychoed and a psych lecture on what this disorder means. And I'm assessing if it's accurate and I'm walking somebody back from these words, and it ends up being so much less productive.
So interesting. So what are the signs of misuse in therapy speak in a relationship? How do you know if what's happening is somebody's just educating you, or one is pointing out something that is in fact true, and you just haven't thought about it? Or because after all, we haven't thought about everything. How do you know?
It can be so hard to know. And again, I think that's the importance of accepting and embracing nuance and complexity in our work. It is not always so clear cut. A narcissist can hide very well for many years. Like it's not always easy to identify. The clearest sign for me is when people are hurling these words at the other person, especially during conflict, and not considering if that is effective or if it's accurate. And they've just sort of leaned on this as like a way to get across their feelings or their level of distress, even though it's not working. And like I say, I make a case that a lot of these words don't need to enter your conversation with a person. Like, I don't know if it's ever been effective to tell your narcissistic spouse, hey, you're a narcissist. Problem solved.
So true. Usually, when you tell your narcissistic spouse something like that, your narcissistic spouse has something to say right back to you.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I really like about your work and this conversation is that when I wrote my book, I I wrote it specifically to support the person being gaslighted. I was very interested in gaslighting from the time that I saw the movie Gaslight, and seeing so many examples in my personal life, having experienced it myself, although be it a milder version in my ex-marriage. Um, but I didn't really focus on the gaslighter and person doing the gaslight. I don't like to label people gaslighter, gaslightee, even though I did it all over my book. Really, it's about the person enacting. But I was very interested in the impact it was making on people because I saw women, particularly who were otherwise independent and confident and out there in the world, making change, making things happen, having a great life. But then in this one relationship, this romantic relationship, they were just feeling like they didn't know their own phone number. That uh, many of them would describe it as soul destroying, or you've heard that expression many times, seen it yourself. And so I wonder, so one, I applaud the fact that you're talking about the couple and a communication issue. And of course, talking about gaslighting eventually leads people to think about, well, what about the person who's doing the gaslighting? So how do you alert the person who's doing the therapy speak to the fact that their therapy speak is not necessarily helpful?
This is the question of the hour, because it is very hard to do. It risks rupture, especially in a couples therapy context when you are trying very carefully to not totally break one of your alliances and have the other person totally step out of the process. So what I try to do is begin with saying, I see how upset you are. Like that is such a serious word or, a disorder. Like this must have really upset you or you're really worried. And I reframe it in terms of what I think is a softer approach emotionally. And then I want to make space to say, this is what this word means to me. And I even say, clinically speaking, in the DSM, this is how we understand this word. I recognize language evolves. This meaning has changed, especially online. I want to make sure we are using it the same way. And that if you mean it in this context, we have to pause and really look at that because that would be incredibly serious. That would mean we should be focusing on an evaluation. We should be really addressing this together and seeing if that is what's going on. And I partly emphasize the seriousness of it because if you come in and tell me your partner is a sociopath who gaslights you all the time, who crosses every boundary, is just generally a toxic person, what I want to know is, what are you doing here? If you have identified all of these things, you gotta go. This is not the relationship for you. But people don't realize that's not what's happening. They want to communicate how upset they are and they want to stay in this relationship. So I try to, without judgment or making people feel embarrassed, level set what we're talking about.
I think that's a great approach. And so what would be a typical response that you might get? 'Cause I would imagine that much of the time, and you tell me, but much of the time people will at least pause.
People back down from it. And what I get most often is, yeah. I mean it in this way. I mean it more in this less clinical, more colloquial way. I don't actually think they are. I just think they're so selfish, right? And then that helps take the air out of the sails a little bit on that term. And then they will use it again, Robin, and definitely they will use it again, but they'll say, I know, not like the real definition of it, but like my definition of it. But that's enough for the other person to not feel defensive, to not have that dynamic enacted and reoccur.
What's the toughest person you've ever worked with? Like where as a therapist, this is probably not going to happen in the way that I think is best for the relationship. Was it a case where you thought, I can't get through? Therapy's what they want, and they're really good at it, and they're sticking to it.
I've had two. And I will say this, I have obviously not done research on this. From my personal clinical experience, it is most often men who are coming in with these words locked and loaded. I've had two cases where it became clear insidiously over time that they were weaponizing these words to control their partners, to make their partners comply, be less upset about the ways in which they were hurting them, damaging the relationship, cheating and saying, you are really freaking out over this. Like this is a strong reaction. I think that like you're unstable kind of thing. And you can't work with those people.
And so how do you deal with that? What do you do?
It depends on the couple and the level of concern I have, but I will typically recommend individual work. And I will try desperately to set them up with a therapist I know will see through what's happening, or I can get a release and speak with and give them the information they need to help this person. There has been a time when somebody was in a truly deeply abusive relationship, and I did speak with the female partner and let her know, this is all that I'm seeing. I'm incredibly concerned for this relationship. I don't think couples therapy is a good idea. I don't know if being in this relationship is going to be a good thing for you. And that's part of the work of being a couples therapist.
What do you think from your own, if I can switch gears for a minute, from your own background, and even if it's about being a middle child, what do you think makes you perfectly suited for this role? How'd you get good at it?
It's a great question that no one has asked me in that way. And I find it curious because I err on the side of being non-confrontational in my own life. Although that's changed a lot over time. But as a younger person, I was certainly more people-pleasing, less confrontational. And I think there's a way in which, because it's not about me and I'm not in the relationship, I am able to not worry about that piece of it and say what needs to be said and sort of set people free by sharing what is actually happening in their relationship and giving them information and skills and knowledge in a way that, for whatever reason, I love. I love to dive in. Give me a high conflict couple on the brink any day.
And that's a great answer. So I wonder then, when you were little, Isabelle, were you paying attention? Were you aware of actually paying attention to what was going on? And I asked that because I remember, well, besides that I'm a therapist as well, and so I hear people talk about their childhoods and how that the ripple effects of what they paid attention to becomes sometimes their career. And childhood, I did pay attention. I remember watching my parents and thinking like, wait a minute, like she didn't deserve that, or I don't know that that's true, or like this is not good, or that was a bid for intimacy and pick it up, or she didn't pick it up, something like that. So when I looked back, when I began to practice, I could see how much time I actually spent, kind of like hanging out at the door of the kitchen and like waiting till the argument was over, or at the kitchen table. What about you?
Well, I come from a pretty waspy New England family, so there is not overt conflict in the way that some people grow up with. There's a lot of unspoken, communicated conflict. And I always felt like if people could just talk to each other and share their feelings, it would be okay. It would work out. And I would put myself in the middle, sometimes circuitously, to try to resolve family members' conflicts. I mean, I think about a time when we were putting up a Christmas tree and my mom was annoyed my dad wasn't helping more. I think he was doing work. And so I went and told him, I was like, Mom's getting pretty stressed. She's upset. You're not helping. Maybe you should come downstairs. And he came down and was like, well, I hear you're upset with me for not helping. And then she got annoyed with me for, going up and telling him and making it more complicated. But I just felt like if she could just let him know and he could come help, then we wouldn't have this this air of tension in this moment. And I definitely feel a pull towards that. And couples therapy is a way that I can do that piece of work. And I'm being asked to.
We're also practicing peace at a very early.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I have a very low threshold for conflict. In some ways, I have a very high threshold for conflict.
It sounds like you can hold a lot. That doesn't mean you like it a lot.
Yes. Yeah. I would love to be able to fix things for people, for myself as expediently as possible. But I also see that intimacy involves conflict and rupture and stress and strain.
And given the world we're living in, I mean, I just have to go there for a few minutes. How do you see countries and on a global stage, we're living in a time where rupture is happening constantly and repair is so much harder and communication is so much more urgently needed. Communication where people are authentic and where everybody uses the words um, that mean the same thing on the other side. And so can you speak to that a little bit?
On a big picture scale, I think we live in a world where everything and everyone feels expendable and every relationship can be replaced. And that's the problem with modern dating. It's like if you don't like the person you swiped with tonight, there's 50,000 waiting for you tomorrow. So there's not a lot of incentive to invest in getting through hard moments with people. And same for countries. I think on a bigger scale, there's this idea like, oh, we'll just replace you with somebody else, or we'll beat you in this technology and then you'll have to come back to the table. And there's not an emotional investment in continuing on through the hard times.
I think that's so important, Isabel. Thank you for saying that. We haven't touched on that before in our conversation. And how do you bring someone to the point where they are, there's an immediacy about the investment and also a follow through? How do you get to invest if they come in and they're either blamers, but whatever, it'll go away and tomorrow will be a new day and I'm just not dealing with it.
I don't know that I have a good answer for it besides that I wish that I could convince people that the hard work of any relationship on any scale is the only thing that leads to the meaningfulness and the true intimacy and connection and joy you get from a relationship. And um, it's hard work for the couple, it's hard work on the individual level, but there's just no perfect person, no perfect company, no perfect country who's not going to put you through challenges, hard times, doubts, even. And there's a line with how much you should put up with, how much you should work with someone, and versus when to leave. But I think people think the line isn't where it actually is anymore.
I think that's very true. And I also sometimes think of it as, well, maybe their invested button is kind of broken from the last relationship, that I've invested and it didn't work, or I've invested and I'm still being hurt. How do you help someone just to work with themselves? Is there a time in couples therapy where you could suggest this is something maybe for you to work on your own?
Absolutely. I mean, anyone coming to a relationship post divorce or post a difficult breakup has a hard time being vulnerable and thinking that it's worth the risk. And I tell people very directly, you break up with everyone except for maybe one person. And being close to another person inevitably involves great risk and probably hurt to a certain degree. And you have to make peace with that and make sure that you have the coping skills and the resiliency and the social supports that you need for that to be okay when those hard times hit. But there's no way of getting closeness without taking that risk.
Well, I actually think that's a beautiful place to stop. There's no way of getting closeness without taking the risk. And I hope that people listening will come to see you if they live in your area or call you and see you on Zoom, and make the investment that they need to make in order to get the goodies that that you provide. Maybe that's a casual way of putting it, but obviously you're really doing the work that you need to do for yourself, and that people will respond to, and that's healing in the world. And where can people find you if they want to contact you?
They can find me at my website, drisabellemorley.com. Ironically, they can find me on Instagram at Dr. Isabelle Morley.
So when you're on Instagram, what are you doing? I hope you're putting pictures of your book out there as well.
I am, yes. I've been doing a lot of book promotion and articles and interviews, and then stuff about therapy speak and couples work.
I've really enjoyed our time together, and really enjoyed listening to your wisdom. I know that my listeners are taking away a lot from this hour. So thank you so much for coming on the Gaslight Effect podcast.
Thank you so much. It was truly an honor to be here and to speak with you as somebody who has brought this term into real awareness in a way that I think has been incredibly impactful for so many people. So thank you.
Thanks for joining me for today's episode. I hope you found it helpful and meaningful. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please leave a rating and a review. I also invite you to follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. This podcast is produced by Mel Yellen, Mike Lenz, and me. All of my work is supported by Susan Pettit, Marcus Estevez, and Imaginarium. Also by Sally McCartan and Jackie Daniels. I'm so grateful to have many people supporting me, and especially grateful for all of you, my listeners.